Um, Hi, I'm Kathy Feeback. I'm the owner of Main Point Books, just down the street from Beth. I want to welcome all of you to Beth's second book launch during COVID, which I don't think too many authors can claim at this point in time. As always, we're very excited to be co-hosting Beth with Radnor Memorial Library. With us today, we have Pam Sidor, the reference librarian and adult event planner from the library, as well as Chad and Alexis, co-founders of Penny Candy Books, the publishers of Cloudhopper. They're waving. They're both poets who met years ago and created Penny Candy with the tagline, "Small press, big conversations." Ariel also is with us. She is the managing editor of Penelope Editions, which is a new Penny Candy imprint that publishes novels. Can speak. Cloudhopper is Penelope Editions' first book, which gives us even more to celebrate tonight. I know that Beth Kephart needs no introduction, but I would like to point out that she is nearing her 30th published book. She is one of the few authors who writes for children, teens, and adults, and we can't wait to throw her a huge in-person party for book 30. Beth founded Juncture Workshops with her husband, Bill, who is also responsible for the wonderful illustrations in Cloudhopper, which makes it even more special. If you would like a signed personalized copy of Cloudhopper, it can be ordered through Main Point Books website. During the presentation, I'm going to mute everybody. And please remember to unmute yourself during the Q&A. And Beth, if you don't mind getting started.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. It's a lot of work for Kathy and for Pam to do these Zoom events. Kathy and Bill and I have been on since 6:30. There's a lot of planning and talking. And so I really appreciate, Kathy, you doing this. And Pam has just been such, a fixture in my writing life for a really long time. She hasn't aged a bit during this whole thing. She does beautiful work here and then out on the river where she rows. And I am excited to introduce Cloudhopper tonight to all of you. I am going to read just the first page or so, first 2 pages, and then I do have a presentation that I put together that essentially tries to answer the question, where does a story begin? But let's begin at the beginning with Cloudhopper, and you don't need to know anything because these are the first lines. Everyone has a name and I have a name, but what I have, which is extra, is a namesake. Sophie Blanchard. The amazing Sophie Blanchard, one of the greatest lady balloonists who ever puffed up into the sky and flew. Aeronaut of the official festivals, according to Napoleon Bonaparte. Official aeronaut of the Restoration, according to King Louis XVIII. Almighty goddess, according to Grandma Aubrey, who is my Grandma Aubrey, the one who gave me my namesake name. I will call you Sophie B. I'm in Gilbertine, which is miles of lovely farm and sky, latitude and longitude, clean breathing. I'm here in this moment with Kay and Wyatt, in the grass with the ants and the crickets and the dew, after the best meteor show of the season. Up above, a girl is walking on the clouds. We're watching from down below. You think she sees us, Kay says. Grass is so tall, I say, and she is so high. Doesn't mean that she can't see us, Kay says. No, Wyatt says, sticking a spoon into the jar of her blueberry jam. It's been a good summer for blueberries. Doesn't mean it factually. It's the end of the night and the start of the day in Gilbertine. It's August and all the beauties got us whipped. There are miles and miles of atmosphere, and there our Cloudhopper goes, her patchwork balloon rising above her head like a giant thought bubble. Her cylinders of fuel are strapped into a pack on her back. Her Doc Martens are a patent leather pink. Her skirt is a white drip. With her hello hand, she works the blast valve and rises, cruises through a bunch of swallows. She turns, does that bouncy thing, touching her boots to the top of trees, the shingles of roofs, the puffs of clouds. We don't know who she is or where she's come from, but she's ours, and so is the show at the start of the day, which is a day when Joseph doesn't need us at the Muni. You ever seen a hopper? And so the beginning. And one writer, blogger, Mind, a woman named Sarah Beth West, read this book a few months ago, and she called me and she said that she didn't know at first whether a cloud hopper was a real thing and whether was this a fantasy or was this a real thing. And we began to talk about the realness of this strange creature, this strange getup, this strange machinery called a cloud hopper. And I am going to get to some images of a real cloud hopper in a little bit, but I wanted to start to talk to you today about where a story begins. This one really began about 6 years ago. Debbie Levy is here, and I remember sitting in a restaurant in Philadelphia reading to Debbie a very early version of this when it was for adults and when it did have a fantastical element to it. It went through so many changes, and it evolved as the national news evolved too. So William Robert Soulett, who is my tech guy here for this part, if you could go to the next slide. So I think we feel our stories. I think there's something intuitive, something that we can't always name. Why am I obsessed with hot air balloons? I've certainly never ridden in one. I'm nervous to do that. Jen Goldblum, who you'll meet later here, is hoping that I'll lose that nervousness. But I was thinking about this. And I was thinking about Around the World in 80 Days. Now, this was a Jules Verne 1872 novel, and it was about Phileas Fogg and a bet that he could circumnavigate the world in 80 days. In the novel, steam, it was rail and it was boat, and there was a reference to a balloon, but balloon wasn't the primary means of transportation. But when the Around the World became a movie in 1956 starring David Niven and Shirley MacLaine, and it had Frank Sinatra and other people. The journey did begin with the gas balloon. And I remember I asked Jeff and his wonderful wife Donna to be here tonight because I remember singing at the top of my lungs this theme song from the movie Around the World in 80 Days. And I know I was captivated by that. And I suspect that got into my bones somehow. The next slide, please, Bill. But there was something else in childhood. There was this red balloon, and this movie has come back and it's been restored, and it's something that I would imagine would be seen over time. But it was this mysterious red balloon that befriended a boy. And the balloon seemed to have a mind of its own. And the movie has a somewhat tragic ending and then an uplifting ending right after that. But it was also an obsession of mine, this red balloon. And when I was researching it for today, I discovered that the boy who plays the boy and the girl who plays the girl were actually the director's children, which made it even more interesting. I just took a screen grab from the movie itself. So the next one. So my father, I always gave my father big, heavy books, hardback books. I was always looking for some piece of history or some biography that would intrigue him. And, he would come for Christmas or his birthday, and, there'd be this pile of wrapped books. And some of them he liked, and some of them I think he was trying to give away to other people. But one of the books that I gave him was this Falling Upwards, How We Took to the Air by Richard Holmes. And it was one of those books that I kind of looked at a little bit before I actually wrapped it and kept wanting my father to read it so that we could talk about it. He wasn't terrifically interested in it. Finally, I bought a paperback copy myself, and I could not, this was like reading the best novel ever. I couldn't put it down. And it's about all these balloons, balloonists, meteorologists. There was a Brazilian priest. He was known as the balloon priest, and he would make money for charity by strapping himself into a chair, cloud hopper like, and ascending. And at one point, he ascended beneath an array of 1,000 small helium balloons. He was hoping during that trip to raise money for a spiritual center, but he never He did ultimately come down and was found, but he was not. He didn't make that trip successfully. Um, I gave my father that book. I started to buy these other strange books like Balloon Flying Handbook and Taming the Gentle Giant, and I would be studying the instruments and studying, and I didn't know what I was doing with this stuff because clearly I wasn't going to become a balloon pilot, but I was deeply interested in it all. And it was in Holmes' book that I discovered this great feminist named Sophie Blanchard. So the next slide. So here she is. There's not many images of her. Her dates are there, 1778 to 1807. And she was the first female solo balloon pilot. She had married a balloonist. He actually flew over Independence Hall in a balloon. And she was oddly someone who felt far more comfortable in the air than she felt on the ground. She was magical. She wore these tremendous costumes. One of her balloons was like standing on a silver sterling tray, you know, and sometimes she would be up so high that she would fall asleep and she would be sort of half frozen when she came down. That Napoleon Bonaparte loved her. King Louis XVIII, as the beginning of my reading said, also loved her. And she died quite tragically at the age of 47. One of the things that she did was she threw fireworks essentially out of her balloon. And she would put on these pyrotechnic night shows, and everybody would gather beneath her, and she'd be tossing these things left and right. And at the age of 47, she didn't feel safe that day, interestingly enough. She felt that it might not be the right night to go up. And it turned out that it wasn't. She let a Bengal fire go, and it ignited the hydrogen in her balloon, and she died that night. The next. So Sophie Blanchard interests me, and she becomes an element in my imagination. And I think about, for the first several versions of this book, the real Sophie Blanchard was a very big player in the book. But there was always another player, a contemporary teen, whose grandmother, Grandma Aubrey, names her Sophie B for Sophie Blanchard. And Sophie's mom is long gone in the book. Grandma Aubrey has raised her. And Grandma Aubrey is not well. She has a condition, and they're not well off either. And yet Grandma Aubrey's greatest dream in my novel is to lift up, to become airborne, to see the world from above. She knows that she's not going to have that in her life, but she's hoping that she can give her granddaughter the possibility of such an experience. And so in the very pages that you don't actually see, but I'd written them and they're no longer in the book, Grandma Aubrey and Sophie B travel from their home in the South, and they drive all these miles to a place where Grandma Aubrey has seen that there is this hot air balloon world. And along the way, as Grandma Aubrey is raising Sophie B, she's telling her all the stories of the great balloonist. We see a few of them inside the pages of Cloudhopper. But Grandma Aubrey is increasingly not well in the story, and it is Sophie's responsibility and desire to take care of Grandma Aubrey. And one of the ways she does that in the pages of the book is she retells the story of the Breitling Orbiter 3, which was a March 1999 phenomenon, Bertrand Piccard and Brian Jones. And it was this balloon, 55 meters tall. It was a sort of hybrid balloon. It made all kinds of headlines. It achieved all kinds of world records. And in the pages of the book, Grandma Aubrey is read the story as if it's happening again. And this calms her and keeps her feeling safe as her disease progresses. And Sophie B is the one reading that story. So the next slide. So, you know, a writer has to be incredibly humble, have a lot of humility. And I know everything that I don't know, which is about everything. I know very, very little about most things. But fortunately, I have these beautiful friends in my life. And one of them is Matt Emmons. He was the CEO of a couple of pharmaceutical companies that I wrote for over the years. And he would always tell me stories about piloting. He had little planes. He was literary. We did a book together. Bill illustrated it. He was unusual, is unusual. And he didn't just tell me stories of being up in the air and looking down. He increasingly began to send me some photographs. So the next slide is a photograph from Matt. When I was working on Cloudhopper, Matt was amazing. I remember long conversations by phone where I would ask him what it would feel like at 5,000 feet up and 10,000 feet up, and what could fail, and what would be the experience. And he so incredibly patiently told me those things. He also told me about sort of the culture in municipal airports. And municipal airport is a major setting here in the book, because Sophie B has two friends. You've met them. There's Wyatt, who right next to the municipal airport has all these old Vietnam vets, and it also has this regular hot air balloon that it flies out. And right next to it is a blueberry farm, and that's Wyatt's blueberry farm. She runs that farm, and she has a little shed where she bakes all blueberry things. And she tests them out at the 24, which is the diner. She's, sharing her deliciousnesses with everybody there. And she's sort of doing market research. And the other friend that you've met is Kay. Kay has just one letter for a name. And his mother is also gone. And he sleeps in a broken down Skyhawk, one of the planes in the Muni. He's taken care of by everybody there. He's well fed, he's dressed. But he, like Wyatt, who has also had a tragic past, and like Sophie, who understands that she will soon lose her grandmother. These are three young people who together build a family. So this is Matt, and he's showing me the world from above. And then the next one. I had this book called Earth Art. It's magnificent. It's huge, hardback book. And it is a series of images of the earth from above, organized according to color schemes. So these are real photographs, not in any way adjusted. And in the book, I have Grandma Aubrey also looking at this book, or a version of it, so that she doesn't just want to see the actual stuff, from above. She's aware of the poetry of the earth from above. And one of my hopes with this book is that those who read it will think a lot about caring for the earth from above. And of course, we understand why that's so important. Just watching the 13 states where the fires are raging. We need to care from this earth from above. We need to care for the earth. And one of the ways we can, or help teach that, is to remind young people of the poetry and the beauty of the earth. So there's this image from Earth Art. And then Bill, there is this. I mean, it's just magnificent. It looks like birds flying, but it's not. And then there's another one. It could be cellular. Every image in this book is spectacular. It's really hard to figure out which ones to share. So we'll go to the next slide. So my father, who many of you know passed away a little over a month ago, he was someone who was always doing the research with me. I would take him on my adventures, whether it was a search for 19th century Philadelphia. Where would my character William live, Dad, if he was of this socioeconomic status in 1870s Philadelphia? And my father and I would go on these walking tours of Philadelphia. We'd walk up and down alleys, and we'd say, William lives in that house. With the great upending, I gave my father a couple of little research projects, which he did. And in this case, I wanted to attend a big balloon festival Um, and of course, these happen in the hottest days of the year, or it did this time. And riskily, I would say, Bill and I took my father to this New Jersey balloon festival. It was very hot. You wouldn't know it from what he was wearing. And you had to sit for a really long time and wait for the sky and the breezes to get exactly, to the right place. And my father sat and sat, and the sun beamed and beamed. And here he is, as we're early on, as we're waiting. And he's, and the next one, please. Of course, while we're waiting, what is a balloon festival without a cannon man? So this was a bit of excitement at the balloon festival as we were waiting for the sky and the air to be just right. And the next one. And I just want to share with you, my father and Bill and I were right up there against the front fence, and right against the fence, I mean to say, with lots of people pressing against us. And slowly but surely, the balloons begin to fill. The next slide. And they fill, and then they start to go up, and music is playing, and the crowds are singing. Go ahead to the next one. And then they're really up there, and you can see the balloon, further inflating. Go ahead, Bill. You can see how exciting it was for everybody there. You can imagine the music playing. You can see the number of balloons. The sky belongs to everyone. And then the next slide. So Bill was looking at this picture and he's like, how is it that the crowd is slanted, but the balloons seem to be level? I don't have an answer for that question, but I'd like you to pay close attention to the Wonder balloon and the balloon that is right up to the right above it, the sort of diagonal colors, because you're going to see that balloon now in this next slide. There's that same balloon in a very different place. So some of you might have been on earlier, and you see that my dear, dear friend, Andra Bell, and her mom, Bev, are on with us. And it was Andra who introduced me to Jen Goldblum, who is a hot air balloon pilot. And just as Matt helped me with the details of the Muni and with altitudes and weather, instruments and all kinds of things I would fail on a test now. Jen very carefully read the book to make sure I wasn't misrepresenting how balloons work. And she's been a great aid in this process. And little did I know when I was standing there in New Jersey with my father and Bill that I was actually watching one of her balloons go up. Here she is inflating. And then the next one. So the balloons, the idea of family, the idea of taking care, the idea of building family in anticipation of losing family, the idea of sustenance, blueberries. But also I've had this weird obsession for a really long time with abandoned barns. This barn is not exactly abandoned, but I like the photograph. I'll show you a few that are. I always want to know what or who lives inside an abandoned barn. Bill knows this about me. So the next one, I have written so many novels that have failed, that have imagined a world inside abandoned places like this. This one I couldn't get to. We were driving along the side of a road and Bill allowed me to stop, but there was no way to get inside that abandoned place. And the next one. This is the interior of a not entirely abandoned place, but it has all of the stuff that I imagine in a barn that becomes a very big part of the story. And let's move to the next slide to find out why. So a book is written over several years, and one grows more politically aware, or the politics change over time. And as I was writing Cloudhopper, I was becoming increasingly unnerved, as I imagine we all have been, by what was happening at the border, and especially with children. And it seemed to me that Cloudhopper needed to be a container, not just for a story about young people forging family, not just a story about balloonists, but also a story about immigration and children in particular. And that takes us back to the Cloudhopper. But how did I feel safe or confident enough to write about immigrant children? I don't write as them. They are minor but essential characters. They are the mystery at the heart of this book. And it's because I have had the great fortune of knowing Maria Wolchan, who created and is the executive director of the Young Center. If you look this up, it's Chicago-based, you will see that it is an extraordinarily important organization dedicated to reuniting children with their families, representing children. And this is a story taken directly from, Maria sent it to me the other day, their website. And it is a story, a positive story, about the reuniting of this young boy and his dad, and all the work that goes into it. The Young Center has so many lawyers, they write so many position papers, they're always advocating, they're raising money, and they're trying really hard to take care of these children. And Maria helped with the book, and there's a character in the book named Marie for her. So the next one. So Cloudhopper, Sarah Beth West asked me what the heck is a Cloudhopper? This is actually a Cloudhopper. You can see that this guy is sitting on a bench, he's strapped to it, he's going up on his own. But Cloudhoppers can be very sophisticated, very expensive. They can also be jerry-rigged at home. And that's an important point for the book. But so that is a Cloudhopper. And then Bill, the next slide. I don't know if any of you saw this the last few days, but just a few days ago, this is David Blaine, you know, David Blaine. He, for a long time, prepared for this, and it's his ascension stunt. This is over the desert in Arizona. This actually unnerves the heck out of me just even to look at it. I was watching the sort of mini film of it. But he, with one arm, is holding on to these, I think they're 52 balloons. If you Google it, you can see him with his little girl, and she's kissing him goodbye, and then he begins to drop weights, you know, and he goes higher and higher and higher, and he's up there for about an hour, and then he parachutes down. But this takes me right back to, you know, the balloon priest. And it's not cloud hopping necessarily, but it is still the wild and strange things that can happen with helium balloons. And then the last slide is next. So Bill, my husband, is not just excellently good, as you just all saw, at turning the slides exactly when I needed them to be turned, but he did illustrate Cloudhopper. Bill and I have collaborated on many projects on paper and in life, and this is his version of the Cloudhopper that I ended reading with. Ever seen a hopper? This is how Bill saw hoppers, and so I'm going to end there. And I think Chad or Alexis, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just speaking briefly about what the book was like when you first got it in your hands, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, because I want to make sure, in Ariel, that you three of you get a chance to speak. So, Chad or Alexis.
Unmuting myself. Took
All
me
right.
to find the button. Well, it didn't look like this. I mean, we're very proud of the way it came together, and the look and feel of it is quite nice. Ariel and Alexis did an amazing job of editing this book, and
I'll
well,
just
I remember what happened.
Oh, sorry, Chad.
Oh, go ahead.
we didn't have a ton of hard work to do. I mean, it was the minute, I think Chad and I read it first, and the minute we read it, as soon as we finished, we were both like in tears, called each other up and said, okay, well, we got to do this one.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember it was when Beth, you and I were talking on the phone for something. I don't remember what, but it was related to Trini's Big Leap. That's the picture book we published last year that you co-wrote with Alexander DeWitt, and it was illustrated by William Sullett. If I were on my game, I'd share my screen and show you a cover of Trini. But anyway, it was while we were talking about Trini on this phone call that you just mentioned that you had this novel that you were trying to place, and we, Alexis and I, had just recently decided that we were going to take this imprint we had formed back in the early days when we found a book we wanted to publish, but it wasn't a picture book. So we created this imprint to handle non-picture book type books that we wanted to publish. But since then, that was January 2017, we hadn't found another one that we wanted. And so I said to Beth, well, why don't you just let us see it? And so she sent it over. But first you sent over this email describing it, and it was, it was crazy. It was vets at a municipal airport, a balloon, and a girl falls out of the sky, and these kids watch and they try to figure out who it is, and Sophie Blanchard, and it just seemed very complicated but very intriguing. So I sent it to Alexis. We both said, yeah, we'd love to see it. And then we saw it and knew that it was a story worth publishing. It so happened that it was our first one, and we're very pleased that it is. It feels appropriate because of the theme of taking off.
Yeah.
And also making sure when you take off that you're not so high that you can't land.
Yeah. I thank you for that. Alexis, were you going to say something else?
I just wanted to show you this.
Oh, wow.
Copy of the red balloon.
Huh.
Got my toddler scribbles. I used to enjoy scribbling. This was way before toddler. This must have been like 1 year old.
Wow. So you've carried that book forward with you all this time?
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Well, Bill, maybe if you unshare your screen and then we can put it on, I can see the gallery view and see if there's any questions from anybody. And there's no requirement for there. That's perfect. Wonderful.
Well, and I would say if Ariel wants to say anything, Ariel, please feel free as the managing editor of Penelope Editions. You've done so much work on this.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, I mean, I'll just add that Chad and Alexis brought the book to me as an option to be, the first book that Penelope published, and I immediately fell in love with it. I think I finished reading it in a coffee shop and texted Alexis and was like, you're right, I am crying at the end. You're absolutely right. So yeah, we're just very happy to have to publish Beth's book as our first.
It does have a deeply emotional ending, and I don't think I could ever read the ending out loud. One of the things that has haunted me, I would say, for a very long time, maybe because my Uncle Danny, Jeff and Donna are here, he would bring us the strangest, weirdest, most wonderful gifts. They would be weirdly wrapped or not wrapped at all. And his gift giving was always phenomenally interesting to me and moving to me. And I have written a number of books in which, for example, House of Dance, in which it's been incredibly important that the young person find a way to somehow honor someone who is older and who may not be living much longer. This has been important to me. And so this book centers around ultimately a magnificent and big gift. Jeff, do you have there's Jeff. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. I want to see if you remember Around the World in 80 Days.
Oh, certainly. I mean, I read the book, I've read several. Being scientifically inclined, I've read a lot of Jules Verne, From the Earth to the Moon and A Trip Around It. I remember um, that from elementary school, The Mysterious Island. But I certainly enjoyed reading Around the World in 80 Days. And the movie is pretty different, and it is silly in some ways. It's sort of winking at itself, I think, throwing in all these cameo appearances by probably 30 well-known actors and actresses. You mentioned Frank Sinatra, but there are a whole lot of others.
Yeah.
But and I really like the gimmick in it, that he thinks that he has failed in his mission of getting around the world in 80 days. And he calculates 80 days because I appreciate this as a scientist. You know, he has all the schedules and he looks at it and adds it up, and it's 80 days. And of course, when he actually gets there is completely, he's making up for all sorts of things that go wrong and working around all sorts of problems that he never anticipated, but somehow with his will to go on, he does manage. But yes, I do remember the balloon and the beautiful theme that you mentioned.
Yeah.
That was quite nice.
Yeah.
I also, when you mentioned Bertrand Piccard, the name Piccard struck a chord with me because it's a very famous family.
Yeah.
He was not the first balloonist in his family. His grandfather was a balloonist as well.
Yes.
Yeah. His father was an adventurer in the opposite direction because he went 35,000 feet deep in his bathyscaphe into the Mariana Trench, the deepest point in the oceans, and quite a feat in the 1960s.
Yeah. And yes, and they wore multiple hats too in that family. Thank you, Jeff. Oh, I see Kate and Cynthia and Nancy. It's so much fun to see all of these faces. And Jen is here. Jen is saying that, this is Jen Goldblum, and she is saying that maybe baby steps for me in a balloon is going up with a tether. Right, Jen?
Well, that's one way to do it, but I have to say that looking at those pictures that you were enjoying of the Earth from the sky,
yeah,
I believe, and knowing how many people that I have flown who have said that they have apprehension about flying or fear of heights or whatever the apprehension around it is, I think that the beauty of the Earth from above, as you get to see it in the balloon, would help you to overcome any reservations that you have.
yeah.
I'm just saying. But you know, we don't push anybody to go up. That's one thing I don't like to do. So you come up, we'll tether you, we'll go up and down, whatever. We'll come out and just watch. That's some of the fun too.
That I'm all in. On that I'm definitely all in.
Hi, Andra.
Are there any other questions? We don't want to keep anybody beyond, but it's so nice to see everybody's face. I'm going to go to the second screen too here. Let me know if there's any question or anything that you want answered, or do you want to just go to sleep thinking about flying? Anybody?
I just want to say I wish you the best with the book. It was so much fun having the slightest, like this opportunity to enter this world with you and just get to be part of it. It was so much fun, and wish you the best with it.
You know, the book wouldn't exist without you. So, I mean, you can't write anything like this without the two experts stepping in and going, now, wait a minute. She would need 2 pair of gloves on Christmas Eve, all of the things that you were saying to me that became important.
Well, you did good.
No, thanks. Kate Moses, Kate from Jeremy. Do you remember Kate? Bill and Jeremy, yes. Hey.
Kate.
Hey, Jeremy. Hey, Bill. So, my dear,
Yeah.
One of the things I wonder about, and I've never had a chance to ask you, is you have so many incredibly rich, what we think of as round characters who are full of emotion and experience and life. And I mean, they really feel like people to me. And what I want to know is, how do they all live with you in your head and heart after the books have come out?
Yeah. I think it's a really emotional thing to finish a book, to know that you're not going to touch it again. I have a really hard time reading once a book is published, looking at a book once it's published. But my characters always do live on. They're always, you know, I'm sitting here wondering how Wyatt's doing and if she's baking anything, you know, different and new with blueberries. They are real to me. And that is why, you know, when you describe, like Chad was saying, you know, it had all these elements, but in the end, it's a very, I think, cohering story, and it coheres. It doesn't feel random or tangential or this happens and this, because it's always about the characters first for me. It's never about the plot. So you have to root those characters. You have to know those characters. You have to hear how they would speak, how they would think to themselves, how they would speak to each other, how they take care of each other is a very big piece of how I write. And once you have characters taking care of each other, filling in the gaps for each other, they're always active and alive. And that's the solid thing that moves through the book. And what happens, happens, but they are the real thing. And maybe it's different when you're a plot-oriented writer. Poor Sarah Duncan's reading Wild Blues, and she's like, well, this was kind of challenging in the beginning, but ultimately all of the books are character driven, and so the plot isn't really what I'm worried about most of the time. Thank you, though, for being there. We're going to talk soon, I know.
Yeah.
How do you and Bill work together in collaboration? Like, does he read your book and then decide what the characters look like, or are you describing them to him in more
Bill,
detail?
William Robert, I'm going to
Well,
let you
I
take that on.
mostly, well, Beth will talk about these characters and about what she's thinking and writing. And like she said, it did take a long time and many, many iterations. So I knew a lot about them by the time I had to do the drawings. But then when it comes time to do the drawings, I kind of go to another place and work in, you know, by myself and without too much influence, because, you know, you just, otherwise I would just be a pencil, you know, drawing.
Has she ever said to you, no, that's not what I thought, that's not what they look like?
Yes, yeah, but you know what, it does, it comes after I've already sort of established some kind of direction. So there's already a context for them. So it's not like, you know, I never have to start from scratch. If she says, well, you know, this is a rougher character, she probably would be, you know, maybe she would be wearing something different, or then I go back to the other room and then I start, you know, thinking about that. But so that's how we work. I mean, it kind of, you know, we talk a lot about the things about the project, but when it comes to doing the actual work,
What you're trying to say is you take direction from nobody.
No,
That's really what you're
well,
trying to say. You know, fess up now. But what's really interesting about Bill's work, you know, he illustrated this. He illustrated Wild Blues, but with Wild Blues, it was watercolors. He did Trini, completely different. He did Dr. Radway, utterly different. I never know what the look of the book is going to be. I'm always surprised. Oh, these are pencil sketches. You know, it's always a surprise to me. In this case, it was really just two of the images that needed just slight, I thought, adjustments, and they did have to do with, well, with one, which is for me the illustration that just makes me cry, but you're going to have to find which one that is. It was a perspective thing. Bill's initial drawing was the camera, if you want to call it that, was looking up, and I felt that the character should be looking up toward, you know, it was the wrong. And then Wyatt, who is this sort of, you know, 13 earrings, cool because she's hiding a deep wound. She just wasn't quite Wyatt yet. But I don't say a lot. I don't say, do I, Bill?
No. I mean, now you don't.
I've been trained.
No, it's best to take something to a certain level of finish, and then we can talk about it. That way, you know where I'm coming from, and I know, you know. So but it works out. It's you know, in the end, it's what it needed to be. So.
Yeah. So.
Beth, I have a little question here.
Yes.
Am I unmuted? Good. Okay. Hi, everybody. Chad, it's so nice to put a face to all the names on the letterheads in the lovely book that I got in the mail. Thank you very much. Chad, Alexi, and Ariel. I haven't finished it, as I said, on purpose, because to me, Beth is first and foremost a poet. And I find poetry on every page. But I thought, what in the world would inspire Beth Kephart to write this? And so I thought, well, no, keep an open mind, just find your poetry on every page. And I did. I read the first chapter. And then I thought, based on a real person. I'm thinking, ooh. So I had to Google Sophie Blanchard. I find, sure enough, real person. And then it says, you know, died 1819, and first this and first that, and brave woman. And then I zeroed in on probably what I hate to say, I'll admit, Wikipedia. It was a cursory check, just quick. Who's Sophie Blanchard? And it said, nervous on the ground and fearless in the air.
Absolutely.
And I thought, that's Beth. That's the vulnerability that you always, in your character, they are vulnerable, lovable in the end, from the beginning. You see that vulnerability. And I was wondering, as a writer, when you found out yourself about Sophie Blanchard, how important was that?
That was it.
That was it.
Even though you're a research librarian and we don't think of you as Wikipedia
but I'm
motivated.
not but in a cursory, you know, the world we live in. But I thought, you know, I'm not a mind reader, but I thought I zeroed in on nervous on the ground, fearless in the air.
Who is that? Absolutely. And
that
question carries centuries and centuries. Yeah.
It's all of us. Nervous on the ground. We fly blind. We make it up as we go. We make it up as we go along.
Well, thank you. Is there any other question or anything that any of you, Jason, I think your head looks great. Jason said,
Jason's head.
yes, Jason said that that he shaved his head to find out what kind of head he had, and he found out he had a wavy head. Right? Wait. So, well, I want to thank, it is really nice that all of you in times like these, which are really hard times, which are heartbreaking times, spent some time with us. And I just want to wish you all goodness, you know. I've been really struggling to find words for this period of time. I don't have words, but what I do think is the only thing that's going to keep us safe is community, is being together, is saying what is missing in Kay, what is missing in Sophie, what's missing in Wyatt. we can fill in those gaps for each other. It's all we've got right now in so many ways. And so you right here are filling in the gaps for us. It's been really special to me to have all of you here and to have my brother and Donna and Jeremy and Bill and all of my friends from church and from books. And I see you, Nancy and Cindy and Louise and all you guys. It's been really wonderful to have you here. And Amy Noveski, by the way, is down there, and we're doing some cool books together. And I think Laura Stanfill is here somewhere, but I'm on this one screen and I don't know. But she's been my tremendous friend and creator. There she is, right there. Hey, you. There she is. This is the editor of my memoir, Laura Stanfill, right here. So I'm glad I looked for you in this sometimes disorienting screen world that we live in. I appreciate every one of you. Thank you so much. Kathy, thank you.
Kathy,
Yeah,
you're the
thank
best.
you.
And Bill, wonderful. Beth, it was just great. And Penny Candy Books, nice to meet you
Thank
in our virtual space. And I hope we can catch up again.
Yeah.
And I should say, please, if you haven't purchased the book already, go to Main Point Books website and buy a copy through Kathy. Let's support independent booksellers right now. It's really important. Don't buy this on you-know-who's website.
Right.
Evil company, but also the bonus is that Beth does live close by and we can get them signed and personalized. And
Yeah, Kathy, you're my bookstore, Beth's bookstore, anyone who lives in the area. Kathy is our independent bookseller in downtown Wayne,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, Eastern Standard Time.
Hey, Melissa, and everybody else
Where's
whose names are
Melissa?
just coming up. There she is, Melissa
Oh, hi,
Sarna,
Melissa.
and Carrie, and Ruda, and Allison, and I just am so worried about Allison's clapping. I just wish I could see that wonderful woman's face, but maybe another time. If I have missed anyone, it's only because I'm not operating these screens the way that I should. But thank you all. And Jeremy, wait, unmute yourself, handsome man. What do you think of your first book launch with Zoom? Wait, we can't hear you.
Oh, he is handsome.
Yeah.
Jeremy, I met you.
Years
You came-
ago.
Yes.
Oh, I guess we can't hear you.
Hold on a second. Maybe he needs to be unmuted.
Oh, from.
No, he is unmuted. Maybe something's not working.
It's okay. I don't want to put you on the spot.
no microphone on his.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, for maybe with the headphones,
Yeah.
reason it wasn't working. But yeah, I thought it was really great.
We're so glad you were here. Thank you for doing this from your Hoboken apartment. We love you very much.
It was great, and yeah.
I should say about Mr. Sulet here, the young Mr. Sulet, that we took a long walk one day on the Radnor Trail when I did not know how to end this story. And you and I talked about all different kinds of approaches. You have always been someone that I've trusted with my stories, and I've always loved talking to you about them. So thank you for being here tonight, Jeremy. It means a lot.
Of course,
Yeah.
I'm happy to.
Yeah.
Also, Jeremy,
Thank
you for your help with Trini and market research.
Yes.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, we hire Jeremy for all kinds of things. So, Kathy, I know that you have to do the goodbye and the unrecord or whatever it is.
That's right.
So there you go. Hey, we did it.
We did it. Thank you, Beth. It's
Thank
been
you, guys.
wonderful,
Thank
everyone.
you so much.
Thank